She called him the ugliest boy in school. She laughed in his face in front of everyone. She made sure he never forgot it. But 3 years later, when Marcus walked into that reunion in a suit that cost more than her rent, driving a car that turned every head in the parking lot, she was nowhere to be found. And when he finally tracked her down, what he saw broke something even in him. This is not just a story about revenge. It's a story about what happens when the cruelest people finally face the life they built with their own hands. Stay until the very end, because the moment you think you know where this is going, everything changes. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now. Excellent Stories is where the most powerful tales live. And trust me, you don't want to miss a single second of what comes next. Marcus had always been the kind of boy who felt everything deeply. He was 17, heavyset, quiet, and kind. The type who held doors open for strangers and remembered birthdays nobody else cared about. He was the kid in the back of the classroom in Atlanta, Georgia, who kept his head down not because he had nothing to say, but because he had learned very early that saying too much only gave people more things to use against him. He weighed 220 pounds. He knew it. Everyone made sure he never forgot it. At Jefferson High, the cruelty had a name. It had a face, and that face belonged to Olivia. Olivia Carter was the kind of beautiful that made people forget their manners. She had long brown hair, a sharp smile, and the social confidence that comes from growing up wealthy in a neighborhood where money was never a question. Her father owned 3 car dealerships across Georgia, and her mother sat on 2 charity boards. Olivia had never been told no a day in her life, and it showed in everything she did. She didn't just ignore Marcus, she made a sport of him. It started small, the way it always does. A comment here, a laugh there, a whisper to her friends as he walked past that was just loud enough for him to hear. Fat, ugly, pathetic, words that were designed not just to sting but to stick. And they did. They burrowed deep into Marcus and built a home there, the way cruelty does when it comes from someone you never wronged. But Marcus had a secret, one that he kept carefully hidden behind the quiet and the weight and the second-hand clothes. He was in love with Olivia. Not the petty, surface-level kind of love, the deep, irrational, 17-year-old kind that doesn't ask for logic. He had watched her from across classrooms for months. He had memorized the way she laughed, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, the way she lit up a room just by walking into it. He knew it was hopeless, but the heart doesn't take instructions. So when Olivia walked up to him one afternoon in the school hallway with a warm smile, the kind she had never aimed at him before, Marcus felt the entire world tilt. "Hey," she said, "Marcus, right?" He blinked. "Yeah. I'm having a party at my place this Saturday. You should come." She said it casually, like it was nothing, like she invited boys like him to her house every weekend. "It'll be fun. I'd really like you to be there." And Marcus, sweet, hopeful 17-year-old Marcus, believed her. He spent 3 days preparing. He borrowed money from 2 of his friends, money he promised to pay back as soon as he could find weekend work. He rented a fitted suit from a place on Peachtree Street. He bought flowers, a card, and a box of chocolates because he didn't know what else to bring and he wanted everything to be perfect. He ironed the suit twice. He practiced what he would say. He barely slept. On Saturday evening, he drove to Olivia's house in his older cousin's car, parked carefully on the street, adjusted his tie in the rearview mirror, and walked up the driveway feeling, for the first time in a long time, like maybe things could be different. The house was full of people. Music poured from the windows. Students he recognized from school stood in the front yard laughing and taking videos. Marcus moved through the crowd carefully, looking for Olivia. When he spotted her near the back of the living room, she saw him too, and something in her expression shifted. Something calculated. She waved him over. Marcus walked toward her, his heart hammering, the flowers in his hand. He smiled. He opened his mouth to say something. And then Olivia raised her voice. "Hey, everybody," she said, loud enough that the music seemed to lower on its own. Heads turned. The room began to quiet. "Can I have everyone's attention for a second?" Marcus froze. Olivia turned to face the crowd, and then she turned back to look at him. and the smile on her face was the cruelest thing he had ever seen. "So, some of you know we made a little bet at school last week." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "The bet was, could I get the most unfortunate-looking guy in school to show up to my party dressed up like he actually had a chance?" The room erupted. Laughter, pointing, phones raised to record. Someone near the back let out a long whistle. Olivia's friends doubled over. And then her boyfriend stepped out from behind a group of people, tall, athletic, grinning, and looked Marcus up and down like he was something that had crawled in from outside. "Bro," he said, shaking his head slowly, "did you really think she was into you?" The flowers were still in Marcus's hand. He stood there, in his rented suit, with his borrowed money and his careful hope, and felt everything inside him go very, very quiet. He didn't cry, not there, not in front of them. He set the flowers down on the nearest surface. He turned around, and he walked out. He made it to the car before his legs gave way. He sat in the driver's seat with both hands on the steering wheel and stared at nothing for a very long time. By the time he finally drove home, clips of him walking in with the flowers were already circulating on social media. People were adding captions, adding filters, adding their own laughter to it. Marcus turned off his phone, lay down on his bed, and stared at the ceiling. That night, very quietly, something changed in him. He didn't go to school for 2 weeks. He didn't answer texts. He didn't respond to the few people who reached out. He stayed in his room, and he thought, and he planned, and somewhere in the middle of all that silence, a decision hardened inside him like stone. He was going to make something of himself, not for Olivia, not for the people who laughed, for himself, because the best revenge, he had decided, was a life so good it made people question every choice they ever made. But first, he had to go back. When Marcus finally returned to Jefferson High, he kept his head down. He wore a mask, not a metaphor, an actual mask, leftover from a school project, because he thought it would make it easier to walk in without being recognized right away. It didn't work. The moment he stepped into homeroom, someone spotted him, then someone else, and then Olivia's voice cut through the chatter like a blade. "Oh my God, he's wearing a mask," she announced, and her friends fell apart laughing. One of them, a girl named Brittany, actually stood up and started walking toward him, reaching for the mask, her hand outstretched. Marcus braced himself. And then a voice from the back of the room said, sharp and clear, "Leave him alone." Everyone turned. The voice belonged to a girl named Jade. Jade Williams was not the kind of person who got noticed at Jefferson High. She was quiet, scholarship-funded, and wore clothes that had clearly been worn before. Her mother worked as a housekeeper, and not just anywhere. Her mother worked in Olivia's house. Jade had grown up knowing exactly what it felt like to be looked through rather than looked at, and she had spent years perfecting the art of invisibility. But in that moment, she was completely visible. "Aren't you tired of doing this?" Jade said, looking directly at Olivia, her voice trembling slightly but never breaking. "What kind of person keeps humiliating someone who never did anything to them?" The room went silent. Olivia's face twisted. "Excuse me, you're going to talk to me like that? Should I tell everyone your mother scrubs my toilets for minimum wage?" The laughter returned, but this time it was different, uncertain. A few people looked away. Jade's face flushed red, but she didn't sit down. When school ended that afternoon, Marcus caught up with her outside. "Hey," he said, "thank you, I mean it." Jade shrugged, still looking ahead. "She does that to everyone." "She did it to you too, just now." Jade was quiet for a moment. "I'm used to it." They walked in silence for half a block. Then Marcus said, "Can we be friends?" Jade looked at him sideways, like she was checking if he meant it. "Yeah," she said, "okay." They exchanged numbers. And as they talked, Marcus realized that Jade walked to school and back every day even though Olivia's car drove right past her house. Because Olivia had told the driver she wasn't allowed in the car, despite her father giving specific instructions that both girls should be dropped home together since they lived so close. Marcus didn't say anything, but he felt something hot and quiet settle in his chest. "Do you want a ride?" he asked. Jade's face lit up, the small, careful kind of light that belongs to people who don't get offered things very often. "Really?" "Yeah, come on." He dropped her home, and when Jade got out of the car and walked through the front door of the house she shared with her mother, the warmth she felt lasted about 4 seconds. Because the living room was flooded. Water covered the entire floor, spreading across the tiles in a thin, dark sheet. Jade's mother was on her knees, scrubbing, her eyes red, her hands raw. "Mom," Jade dropped to her knees beside her. "What happened? Who did this?" Her mother tried to wipe her face. Couldn't. The tears kept coming. "It was Olivia," she said. "She came home and started pouring water. I tried to stop her. She said I wasn't cleaning fast enough. She called me her voice broke. She couldn't finish it." Jade's jaw tightened. She knew exactly why Olivia had done it. Because of what happened at school. Because Jade had embarrassed her and Olivia didn't let things go. Jade stood up. "I'm going to talk to her." And then, from the top of the staircase, came a cold laugh. Olivia was standing there in a silk robe, arms folded, looking down at them like they were furniture. "Next time," she said pleasantly, "you'll remember your place." And then she picked up a bucket, a full bucket, and threw the water down the stairs. Jade's mother pulled her back before she could move. "Please," she begged. "Don't. We can't afford to lose this." Jade stood there, soaked, trembling, while Olivia walked back to her room without a second glance. That night, Olivia did something else. While Jade and her mother finished cleaning and gathered their things to leave, Olivia slipped into the kitchen, found her mother's keyring in her bag, and palmed the house key. Jade and her mother discovered it was missing when they reached their front door. Jade went back, asked Mrs. Carter, searched everywhere, nothing. They sat outside their own home in the Georgia night while the sky opened up and the rain came down in sheets. Jade's mother pulled her close and they huddled against the wall, soaking wet, shivering, while the rain fell and fell and fell. Jade didn't say anything, but she made a promise to herself in that silence, the kind of promise that doesn't need words, that lives in the bones. This would not be forever. Now, there is something else you need to know about Marcus. Because while all of this was happening, while Jade was protecting him and suffering for it, Marcus had quietly discovered something that was about to change everything. Marcus had a cousin named Derek. Derek was 22 and rising fast, a singer out of Houston, Texas, whose mixtape had started getting serious radio play across the South. Derek wasn't famous yet, but he was becoming famous. And Olivia, as it turned out, was one of his most obsessive online followers. Marcus found out when he was visiting Derek one afternoon, and a notification popped up on Derek's screen. A long, gushing message from a profile he recognized immediately. He leaned closer. It was Olivia. Months of messages, dozens of them, all unanswered, full of heart emojis and compliments and thinly veiled desperation. Olivia Carter, who acted at school like she was untouchable, had been begging a singer she'd never met for a reply for the better part of a year. Marcus stared at the screen for a long moment. Then a slow, careful smile crossed his face. "'Cause," he said, "can I borrow your phone?" Derek raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "I just need to reply to one message." Derek handed it over. Marcus typed, "Hey, sorry I've been slow, been in the studio, what's up?" Olivia replied in under 3 minutes. She was a completely different person, warm, nervous, hanging on every word. Marcus, pretending to be Derek, moved the conversation to a private number, a spare phone he bought the next day, and for the next few weeks he played the role carefully, patiently, with the quiet precision of someone who had spent a lot of time thinking about this. The prom was coming up, and Olivia, who had already started loudly telling people at school that she had a very special surprise date, was now texting Derek daily about what she was going to wear, how she was going to arrive, and how jealous everyone was going to be. She had broken up with her actual boyfriend by this point, coldly, efficiently, without apology. He had booked a limo. He had bought a corsage. He had done everything right. She told him he was no longer on her level and walked away. Marcus watched from a distance and said nothing. Meanwhile, something else was happening, something neither of them had planned. Marcus and Jade had been spending time together, working out in the park near her house after school, studying at the library, taking long walks through Decatur talking about everything and nothing. Jade had put him on a nutrition plan, quietly and without making it a big deal, just suggesting things, cheering him on when he pushed through. Marcus had never had someone in his corner like that before. Not like this, steady, consistent, present. He started waking up early to run, not because anyone was watching, because he wanted to. As the weeks passed, Marcus began to change. Not just on the outside, though that was happening too, the weight shifting, the face sharpening, the posture straightening, but something deeper. The shame that had lived in him since that party began to loosen. Not disappear, but loosen. Jade noticed. "You look different," she told him one afternoon. "Different how?" She thought about it. "Like you stopped apologizing for taking up space." Marcus looked at her, and for the first time since Olivia's party, he felt something that wasn't anger or hurt or ambition. He asked Jade to prom. She said yes before he finished the sentence. "If you're still watching, drop a comment right now and say, 'I'm here for Marcus.' Because what happens at this prom, nobody saw coming. Not Olivia, not her friends, not a single person in that room. Keep watching." The week before prom, Olivia texted Derek in a panic. "My car is in the shop. I don't know how I'm getting there." Marcus, as Derek, replied immediately, "Don't stress. I'll handle everything. Just be at the school entrance at 8. Olivia nearly lost her mind with excitement. She had already spent an enormous amount of money on her dress, her hair, her makeup. Money she didn't technically have. Because unbeknownst to her parents, Olivia had gone into her mother's jewelry box and taken 2 gold necklaces, the real kind, not costume pieces, and sold one of them to a buyer she found online. The money covered everything she needed. The second necklace she kept, tucked in the back of her own drawer for safekeeping. The night of prom arrived. Olivia stood in her mirror in the Carter house in Buckhead, wearing a gold gown that caught the light and looked like something from a magazine. She looked stunning. She knew it. She drove to the school in a rented car, texting Derek the entire way. "I'm here. I'm outside. Where are you?" A reply came, "I'm close. Wait by the entrance. You'll know when I arrive." Olivia smoothed her dress and waited. Inside the venue, the prom had already started. Music, lights, couples taking photos. Olivia's ex-boyfriend was already inside, standing with friends trying to look unbothered. He had heard about Derek. Everyone had. Then a stir ran through the crowd near the entrance. Olivia walked in, not with a superstar, but with a figure in a long coat and a full mask, face completely hidden. She had agreed to the dramatic entrance without question, because of course she had. The whispering started immediately. "Who is that? Is that really him?" Everyone craned to see. Olivia led her date to the stage. The DJ cut the music. A spotlight swung over. Olivia reached for the mask, her heart hammering, her smile enormous. "Ready," she whispered. And the mask came off. Standing beside Olivia under the spotlight, in a long borrowed coat, grinning with 2 missing front teeth, wearing clothes that hadn't been washed recently, was a man who sold newspapers outside the CVS on Ponce de Leon Avenue. Marcus had found him that morning, offered him $40 and a hot meal, and explained exactly what he needed. The room erupted. Not politely, not quietly. Fully the kind of laughter that doesn't stop, that feeds itself, that bounces off walls. Someone screamed. Someone else fell into their friend. Olivia's ex-boyfriend laughed so hard he had to sit down. Olivia stood under the spotlight and felt the world collapse. She ran. Off the stage, through the crowd, past the exit doors, into the parking lot. And that is when she saw them. Marcus and Jade, just arriving. And they were, there is no other word for it, stunning. Marcus walked like someone who had decided to take up exactly as much space as he deserved. The suit was navy, the fit perfect, the shoes polished. He had lost weight, yes, but more than that, he carried himself differently. He was present in a way that commanded attention without demanding it. Beside him, Jade wore a deep red dress that she had found at a consignment shop in Little 5 Points and altered herself. She looked like she had been waiting her whole life to walk into a room like this, and had decided tonight was the night. People stared. People who had once laughed at Marcus whispered to each other, checking twice. Is that really him? Olivia stood in the parking lot in her gold dress with her mascara beginning to run and watched them walk past her. Neither of them looked at her. Inside, Marcus danced with Jade. They took photos. They laughed. At some point near the end of the night, Marcus stood at the edge of the dance floor and looked around the room he had once dreamed of attending with a girl who had only ever seen him as a punchline, and he felt nothing but lightness. Olivia, meanwhile, was not so light. She had gotten back in the rented car, furious and humiliated, and driven into the Atlanta night with tears blurring her vision. She was not paying attention. She was not thinking about the road. The tree at the end of Northside Drive didn't move. The car did. The impact was loud and sudden and absolute. The front end crumpled. The airbag deployed. Olivia sat in the wreckage, shaking, unhurt physically, and stared at what she had done to a car she had paid for with stolen money. By the time she got home, the house was dark. The front door was locked. She knocked, nothing. She called her mother's phone, nothing. She called her father. A text came back, short, final, like a door closing. We know about the necklace, Olivia. We know everything. Go to your grandmother in Savannah. We need space. Don't come back until you're ready to be honest. Olivia sat down on the front step of the house she had grown up in. And she cried. Not the dramatic kind. The quiet, ugly kind. The kind where there's nothing left to perform for and no one watching, and all you have is the weight of every choice you ever made sitting on your chest. Her parents had found out about the necklace because Marcus had told them. He had noticed something was off during the weeks leading up to prom. A mention from Jade about Olivia's sudden access to money, and he had pieced it together carefully, gathered what he could, and made a quiet phone call to Mr. and Mrs. Carter 3 days before prom night. He hadn't done it out of cruelty. He had done it because he knew that if no one ever stopped Olivia, she would keep going until she destroyed herself completely. What happened next, though, he hadn't predicted. 3 years passed. Marcus graduated, got a full scholarship to Georgia Tech, studied computer engineering with the same quiet intensity he'd once applied to surviving high school, started a software development firm with 2 friends from college during his junior year. By the time graduation came around, the company had its first real client, a mid-size logistics firm in Chicago. By the time the high school reunion invitation arrived in his inbox, the company had offices in Atlanta, Austin, and Toronto. Marcus was 20 years old and already changing. Jade had gone to Spelman on scholarship. She was studying business. She and Marcus had never officially stopped talking. What started as friendship had quietly, without announcement, become something more. They were careful with it, both of them, the way people are when they know what they have is real. The reunion was held on a Saturday evening at Jefferson, High's newly renovated gymnasium. Marcus arrived in a black Mercedes. Jade was beside him, wearing something simple and effortlessly perfect. When they walked in, the reaction was immediate, the kind of electric silence that happens when a room has to completely recalibrate its understanding of someone. Is that Marcus? He looks. Did you know he started a company? I heard it's worth. Marcus moved through the room calmly greeting people, accepting the compliments and the wide eyes with the same quiet he had always carried, except now it read completely differently. Before, his quiet had seemed like hiding. Now it seemed like confidence. He looked around the room. Olivia was not there. He noticed it, but didn't think much of it at first, until he asked someone, and the answer made his brow furrow. She couldn't make it, Jenny, one of Olivia's old friends, said. She was avoiding his eyes. Why not? Jenny's voice dropped. She's in Savannah with her grandmother. Marcus went still. He thought about what he knew that after prom night, Olivia's parents had sent her away, that she'd had to drop out of the private school she'd transferred to after Jefferson, that the car rental company had found her and pressed charges for the damages, and that the debt had spiraled when she couldn't pay. He had heard pieces, not the full picture. "Take me to her," he said. Jenny stared at him. "What?" "I want to see her. Take me to Savannah." The reunion basically ended at that point. Half the class piled into cars out of sheer curiosity. Marcus, Jade, Jenny, and a convoy of former classmates winding south on I-16 toward a small town outside Savannah that none of them had ever visited. The neighborhood was quiet. The houses were modest. Olivia's grandmother lived in a small white house with a porch swing and a garden that had seen better days. She wasn't home. A neighbor told them she was at the church on the corner. It was a wedding day. They walked into the small church, and the sight stopped every single one of them. Olivia was standing at the altar in a plain white dress, not a wedding gown, just a white dress, beside a man who was clearly decades older than her. He had a hard face, rough hands, and he was watching the door with the expression of someone managing property. Olivia turned at the sound of footsteps, and she saw Marcus. Her face went white. The ring she was holding slipped from her fingers and hit the church floor with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the silence. She stood perfectly still, and for a moment she and Marcus simply looked at each other across the length of that small church. Two people who had last seen each other in a parking lot in Atlanta, now meeting here, at the end of whatever this had been. Then Olivia ran. She went out the side door. Marcus followed. Jade followed Marcus. They found her at the back of the church, sitting on the ground in her white dress, crying, not performing, not posturing, just crying, the way a person does when they have finally run out of road. Jade reached her first. She knelt down and put a hand on Olivia's shoulder. Olivia looked up. Her eyes were red, her face wet. "How did you find me?" she asked. "The reunion," Jade said quietly. "You weren't there." Olivia let out a sound that might have been a laugh. "I couldn't face anyone." Marcus stood a few feet back, watching. His expression was unreadable. "What happened?" Jade asked. And Olivia told them. After prom, her parents had sent her to her grandmother. She had lost her place at school. The rental car company had sued for damages, $15,000 in repairs and fees that she had no way to pay. Her grandmother, who lived on a fixed income, had borrowed money from a local farmer named Roy to try to help cover part of the debt. But it wasn't enough. And Roy, who had given the money as a loan, had come to collect it in the only currency Olivia had left. "He said if I don't marry him," Olivia said, her voice flat, "he'll report the default to the courts and I'll go back in front of a judge. I've already had one hearing. I can't afford a lawyer." The group of classmates, who had crowded around the side of the church, went very quiet. Jade didn't say anything. She just kept her hand on Olivia's shoulder. Marcus looked at the door of the church. Then he walked back inside. Roy was still standing at the altar, talking to the priest in a low, irritated voice. He looked up when Marcus walked in. "Who are you?" he asked. "I'm someone who wants to solve this," Marcus said calmly. "What's the total debt?" Roy's eyes narrowed. $15,000, but this ain't your business." "Give me your account number," Marcus said. "It's about to be settled." Roy stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he pulled out his phone. Marcus transferred the money. He didn't look at Roy again after that. If you just felt that, drop Marcus in the comments right now, because what he does next, even I didn't expect. Stay with me. Outside, Jade had helped Olivia to her feet. When Marcus came back through the side door, Olivia looked at him with an expression that had no name, something between shame and shock, and a gratitude too large to hold. "I don't understand," she said, "after everything I did to you." "You'll pay it back," Marcus said. His voice wasn't warm, but it wasn't cruel either. It was simply direct, the way a person speaks when they have moved past the emotion into something cleaner. "Not in money. In 10 months of work, I need a house manager for my Atlanta property. You'll start Monday." Olivia blinked. A house manager. A cleaner, Marcus said plainly. You'll clean, maintain the property, and follow the schedule. You call me Mr. Davis. You start at 7, you don't quit. He set a piece of paper with his address at her feet. Then he walked to his car. The classmates followed. Olivia stood at the back of that church in her white dress and looked at the paper on the ground, and for a very long time she didn't move. 1 week later, she knocked on the door of a house in Buckhead that was larger than anything she had grown up imagining, not because her family had been poor, but because this kind of wealth had a different quality. The kind built by a person who started with nothing and chose every brick themselves. Jade answered the door. Olivia, she said warmly, come in. Olivia had expected coldness from Jade most of all. She had not expected warmth. She didn't know what to do with it. The months that followed were hard in a way Olivia had never experienced. Not physically brutal, though the work was real and constant. The floors, the windows, the laundry, the daily schedule. Hard in a different way. The kind of hard that comes from having to be present with yourself when you have spent your entire life performing for other people. She scrubbed floors in a house where the boy she once publicly humiliated now lived with easy confidence. She cleaned windows while Marcus and Jade ate breakfast and laughed in the kitchen. She changed linen in a house where her old life had no currency. Marcus was not cruel to her, but he was not warm either. He gave instructions, kept his distance, and treated her with the same efficient detachment he brought to everything. If she made a mistake, he corrected it once. If she did the work well, he didn't comment. He simply noted it and moved on. It was, in its way, harder than cruelty. One afternoon, 3 months in, Marcus came home with a visitor. Olivia was cleaning the upstairs hallway when she heard the front door and footsteps below. She came down the stairs with her bucket and cloth, turned the corner, and stopped. Standing in the living room, looking uncomfortable and uncertain, was her ex-boyfriend from Jefferson High, the one she had dismissed before prom, the one she had told was no longer on her level. His eyes found her slowly, then widened. Olivia, he said softly. The cleaning cloth fell from her hand. She turned and walked quickly back up the stairs, her face hot, her chest tight, and went into her room and pressed her back against the door. She could hear Marcus's voice from below, and then, she was almost certain, the quiet sound of him laughing. She sat on the edge of her bed and let herself cry, because she knew Marcus had done that on purpose, and she knew she deserved it, and knowing both of those things at the same time was almost unbearable. Later that evening, she went to find him. Mr. Davis, she said. He looked up from his laptop. Haven't you done enough? Her voice was quiet, but her hands were shaking. Haven't I paid enough? Marcus looked at her for a moment. Have you? Olivia opened her mouth, closed it. Go back to work, Olivia. She did. The months continued. 7, 8, 9. Something shifted somewhere around month 8, not dramatically, but the way seasons change, gradually, and then all at once. Olivia stopped counting down. She stopped performing the role of the person who was enduring something. She simply began to do the work because the work was there, and doing it well was the only thing in her control. She noticed other things too. Jade brought her food when she was working late. Always without comment, a plate left on the kitchen counter, covered, warm. She never made a production of it. She just left it there. On Olivia's birthday in month 9, Jade came into her room after dinner and set down a cupcake with a single candle. Happy birthday, she said, and then left. Olivia sat alone in that small room and looked at the candle and thought about her birthday parties growing up, the ones her adoptive parents had thrown for her before she had burned everything down. The balloons and the cakes and the trips to the beach. The warmth of being held by people who had chosen her, who hadn't had to love her but had loved her anyway. She thought about how she had treated them. She blew out the candle and let herself feel it, all of it, for the first time. On the last day of the 10th month, Olivia packed her bag. She had nowhere to go. Her grandmother was in Savannah. Her parents, She didn't know if they would even take her call. She packed slowly, methodically, the way a person does when they are trying to delay the moment they will have to step outside and face the unknown. She carried her bag to the living room. Marcus and Jade were both there, sitting together on the couch, quiet, watching her. "I'm leaving," Olivia said. Her voice was steady. "Thank you for what you did. In Savannah, I know I don't deserve." "Olivia," Marcus said. She stopped. His voice had changed. Not cold, not detached, something else. "There's something we want to show you." He nodded toward the hallway. One of the doors, the one that had always been closed, opened slowly. And through it walked two people that Olivia had not seen in 3 years. Her mother. Her father. Olivia's bag hit the floor. She stood there with her hand over her mouth, and then she crossed the room in 3 steps and wrapped her arms around them both, and she cried in the way she had needed to cry for 3 years. The full kind, the honest kind, the kind that doesn't care who is watching. "I'm sorry," she kept saying. "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." Her mother held her face in both hands. "We know, baby," she said softly. "We know." Later, when her parents had taken her outside to their car, Jade came to stand beside Marcus in the doorway. Olivia turned back one last time. "Why?" she asked. She was looking at Marcus. "After everything, why did you bring them here?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Because watching someone be lost forever isn't the same as winning," he said. "And because Jade's mother taught me that some things matter more than being right." Olivia looked at him for a long moment, and then she walked to him, and she hugged him quickly, genuinely, without agenda. "I see you, Marcus," she said quietly. "I'm sorry I didn't before." She pulled back, wiped her eyes, turned to Jade. "Thank you," she said, "for the cupcakes, for all of it." Jade smiled. "Be good, Olivia." They watched the car pull away until it disappeared around the corner. Marcus stood in the doorway of the house he had built. Jade stood beside him, their shoulders touching. Neither of them said anything for a while. Then Jade said, "Are you okay?" Marcus thought about it. "Yeah," he said, "I actually am." If this story moved you, if you felt every bit of that, hit the like button right now. And comment, "I see you," if you believe that the people who were overlooked always had the most to offer. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Because here is what this story is really about. It is not about revenge. Not really. Revenge is too small a word for what Marcus did. What Marcus did was choose, every single day, to build something real instead of letting bitterness hollow him out. He could have let what Olivia did define him. He could have spent his life being the boy from that party. Instead, he decided, quietly, privately, without announcement, that he was going to become someone that even his worst memories couldn't diminish. And Jade, who stood up when it cost her something, who brought food without fanfare, who never let cruelty make her cruel, who built a life alongside someone who saw her and who saw him right back. Nobody wins alone. The people who survive the hardest chapters are almost always the ones who found one person who believed in them before they believed in themselves. So if you're the Marcus in this story, the one being laughed at, the one who feels small, the one sitting in the parking lot wondering if it gets better, hear this. It does. Not by accident, not by waiting, by deciding. And if you have a Jade in your life, someone quiet, someone steady, someone who shows up, please don't overlook them. They're the whole story. Subscribe to Excellent Stories right now if you believe that the ones who were counted out always had the most power. New stories every week, and they only get better from here. Drop, "I choose to rise" in the comments if this one hit you somewhere real. Thank you for watching until the very end. It means everything.